Well, it's time now for our political panel with correspondent Hayden Cooper in Canberra. And he's joined today by the Labor Party's Stephen Jones and the Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg.
Gentlemen, good afternoon and thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Hayden. Hi, Stephen.
Firstly to you, Stephen Jones, and on the flood levy, the government is now just one vote away from success. How much do you think Nick Xenophon's support will cost?
Look, obviously we welcome the news that Mr Wilkie is going to support the government. It brings us one step closer to the task of rebuilding Queensland, putting in the new roads and the new infrastructure, which is critical. Mr Xenophon, obviously an important vote in the Senate, but the real issue here is for Tony Abbott, and we appeal to him once again to get behind the government, get behind the effort to rebuild Queensland and stop playing politics with this issue.
We'll go to Josh Frydenberg in a moment, but firstly, the Prime Minister has found $150 million to secure the support of the Greens and Andrew Wilkie. Is it fair to say now that the government can find the savings for the MPs to get that support, but it can't find savings so that the taxpayer doesn't have to pay a new tax?
Well, that's not quite right. It's $100 million, which has been found to accommodate the agreement with the Greens, which is about putting back in place some of those green flagship programs that we were postponing.
And 50 for Andrew Wilkie in another program.
These are, the most important thing here is that we focus on what needs to be done, and that is to rebuild Queensland, to get the roads running so that kids can get to school, that we can get the trucks back on the road, and that we can get tourists back into those tourist destinations. Let's focus on that. Yes, we have always said that $2 out of every $3 that is going towards the $5.6 billion rebuild in Queensland is going to come from budget savings. The job's a little bit harder now, but we're committed to doing it.
Josh Frydenberg, is this battle now essentially lost for the opposition?
Absolutely not. Hayden, this week's been very revealing again, because it shows that while Labor may be in government, it's the Greens that are in power, because Julia Gillard has capitulated to the Greens agenda, as expected, not just on the solar panel scheme, but also in relation to rental affordability scheme, and now to Andrew Wilkie on his measures. And really, what does the Labor Party stand for if it promises to cut these programs in order to fund the reconstruction, and then in this negotiation just puts up the white flag? And I just think it's symptomatic of a much broader malaise in their economic management.
We stand for rebuilding Queensland. That's what we stand for, Josh.
You know, well, Stephen, I'll let you speak for a second. Now I'll just say what Tony Abbott has said is we'll introduce a number of responsible budget decisions in order to pay for the reconstruction without just another tax on Australian households who are already going to now face a carbon tax. They were going to face a mining tax, and when they're seeing cost of living going up dramatically. So I just think Julia Gillard is just waving in the wind here, and let's see what Nick Xenophon gets out of this government.
Josh, you call those measures responsible. Half your party room calls them reckless and redneck and other sorts of things. It appears that your party room is very divided over your savings propositions. We're focused on the job of governing. We're focused on rebuilding Queensland, and I think you need to tend to your backyard before you start handing advice out to everyone else.
Hayden, can I just say what has dominated the papers today is the AWU not just having a potshot at Rio Tinto, which is completely inexplicable, but also Bill Ludwig having a go at the Minister for Trade, Craig Emerson, calling him a dishonourable rat. Now, Wayne Swan, who's the Treasurer of the Commonwealth, has stayed quiet because he's a member of the AWU. So, you know, Stephen, you're a union man. You don't have to look very far to know about these divisions in the Labor Party, but they're on the front page of the paper today.
That is a little bit off track, but getting back to the flood levy, Nick Xenophon says that he wants something done to force the states to take out disaster insurance. That seems to be what he's negotiating for. Stephen Jones, is that a reasonable request?
Look, our position on this right from the very beginning is let's look at what is immediately before us. And what is immediately before us is rebuilding over 70,000 kilometres of roads in southeast Queensland and elsewhere, making sure the power systems, making sure people have clean water and that the sewage systems aren't polluting our waterways. Yes, after we get that immediate stuff done, we can start looking at the longer term issue about how we manage recurring disasters in this country, particularly as our climate is changing. But let's deal with what's immediately before us, and that's what we ask the independents, that's what we ask Tony Abbott to get behind, and then we can have a longer term discussion.
But that's the demand he's making right now. In other words, the Prime Minister might have to give in to get his support. Do you think that's something that the Prime Minister is willing to do?
Look, we'll negotiate in good faith with Senator Xenophon and as we have with all of the crossbenchers, but the most important thing we'll be taking into those negotiations is the importance of getting behind the rebuilding effort in Queensland and not playing politics.
Josh Frydenberg, I'm sure many would say that this is actually a sign of the Prime Minister's strong negotiation skills.
Far from it. Strong negotiation skills would have meant that she wouldn't have gone down the path of a flood levy to start with and another new tax, and she would have actually taken the tough decisions to cut programs, which she has not done. On Nick Xenophon and reinsurance, he raises a very important point, and I've yet to hear a satisfactory explanation from the Bligh government in Queensland why they didn't have such insurance measures in place, and now why the taxpayer is going to be footing the bill. So, Nick Xenophon is raising some interesting questions here.
Okay, look, on other matters today, the three senior Labor figures have completed their review of what went wrong in the federal election for Julia Gillard and her team. Let's pause for a moment and have a look at one of them, Senator John Faulkner.
We're talking about involvement in politics, involvement in Labor politics, involvement in the Labor Party being a much more meaningful experience, giving members a say, giving members a vote.
Now, Stephen Jones, as you know, the report calls for basically an overhaul of the way that candidates are selected, more say to the rank and file, and even a hint of an American-style primary system. Would you back those changes?
Look, we are the oldest political party in Australia, one of the oldest in the world. We still hold true to our founding values of fairness and equity and decency. But as times change, then the party continually has to look at the way it organises itself and the way it operates. And I welcome this review, as the National Executive I'm sure will, as the Prime Minister will, and our job is to ensure that we take stock of what party members have told us and what Labor supporters have told us and put those recommendations into practice.
It would surely mean less of a say for the unions, wouldn't it? And you're a former union leader. How do you feel about that?
I'm a former union leader. I'm still I'm a life member of my union, and I'm proud of that, and I'm very proud of that. But nobody else could be more supportive of these changes than me, because I think the strength of Labor is in the fact that it is a big tent, a broad church which has an important role for the union movement, but also has a very an increasingly important role for other organisations and for rank and file members as well.
Josh Frydenberg, is it time for a rethink of the way the Liberal Party approaches its rank and file?
Look, a couple of points here, Hayden. Firstly, reviews are natural post-election. The Liberal Party is also undertaking a review at present. But I noticed that what they've been proposed, the Labor Party so far, is just about how to increase the membership. But we do know who really are the key members of the Labor Party, and as you say, that's the union movement. 100% of Labor's front bench, Hayden, are members of the union movement. So that's not about to change anytime soon. And what I'd be interested to know is when the results of this review are either made public or private, and it's found that Julia Gillard, the real Julia or the unreal Julia, didn't sort of mesh with the Australian people, what are they going to do about that? What's Bill Shorten going to do about that? So I think they're going to be the hard questions, not about whether we have or Labor has a primary system in going forward for pre-selections and so forth, is what are they going to do about their inability to cut through with the Australian people with their current Prime Minister?
Now, Josh Frydenberg, your side, of course, has been plagued by leaks from Shadow Cabinet this week, most of them arguably aimed at undermining Scott Morrison. Is that a dangerous trend for your party?
Look, obviously solidarity is critical. It was very good to see Tony Abbott and a number of other senior colleagues rally behind Scott this week when he came out and said that he'd gone a little bit too far on that particular issue. But look, I think we've got a great team with Tony Abbott number 1 and Julie Bishop at number 2. The polls have shown that that team and the coalition are cutting through with their message, and I think you'll continue to see us go from strength to strength in that regard.
But is there, it looks to many as though there's some kind of war within the party between the moderate faction and the conservative faction.
Not at all. I think, we're all about policy at the end of the day. We're unlike the Labor Party with those big left and right factions, and we're very different. We're very different like that. We're not about
say that with a straight face,
Stephen. Yeah, I can say it with a straight face. Absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, we are in opposition, and it is our job to hold the government to account. And Tony and Julie are doing a very good job at that, putting forward a positive alternative agenda while pointing out the major flaws in the way Julia Gillard and her government are conducting their business. So, look, I think it's going to be a very interesting parliamentary fortnight when we get back there on Monday. But as far as party unity is concerned, Tony Abbott and Julie Bishop are leading from the front.
Just finally, and back on the ALP question, the Prime Minister has already this afternoon insisted that she will retain the right to choose her ministry, and the caucus won't get the right to choose. We don't actually know if that's one of the recommendations from the report. Are you comfortable with that?
I'm very comfortable with it. That was a recommendation after it was a change after the 2007 election, and I think Australians elect their political leaders on the understanding that those political leaders will be able to implement policies and be able to choose their leadership team. So unequivocally that will be supported within the parliamentary caucus, and I think what is really exciting about this review is not only does it enable us to look at what's gone wrong over the last couple of years and fix that up, but it also creates the platform for us to focus on the real issues. And Australians don't want us to spend all of our time talking about ourselves. They want us to focus on the issues that Julia Gillard has identified, and that's rebuilding Queensland, getting on with fixing up our education system, fighting the war in Afghanistan, and getting people back to work.
All right, we could spend most of the afternoon talking about ourselves, but we're out of time. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Thanks,
Great
Hayden.
to be with
Thanks,
you,
Stephen.
Josh.
And thanks to Hayden Cooper for that political panel. Now here's Jeff Ernest with the sport.